Welcome back! My name is Baller Scuba. This is Video Games Over Time. We are still in 1985. Today, we're going to talk about the Sega Mark III. The story of the Sega Mark III takes us back to Sega. We have talked about Sega several times before. They have been responsible for Zaxxon and Hang-On. We last talked about Sega in our video on Space Harrier. Sega had also released the SG-1000 in 1983, which we briefly mentioned before. The console was designed and released to be a direct competitor to Nintendo's Famicom. After the buyout of the company by Hayao Nakayama and David Rosen in 1984, Sega released a follow-up to the SG-1000 on July 31st, 1984, the SG-1002, sometimes known as the SG-1000 Mark II. This console was similar to the original console, but replaced the hardwired joystick with detachable joypads. The SG-1000 and SG-1002, though moderately successful, fell behind the Famicom in popularity and in sales throughout 1984. The Famicom was more powerful than either of Sega's consoles, and the Famicom was benefiting from the use of third-party developers, which Sega avoided. In response, Sega began work on another modification of their SG-1000 console. This new version was headed by the same team as the original console, led by Hideki Sato and Masami Ishikawa. The main change in this system from the original SG-1000 would be a custom graphics chip made in-house. This chip replaced the TMS 9918 graphics chip in the SG-1001 and 2 with a more powerful chip based on the System 2 arcade board used in the arcade versions of Ninja Princess and Choplifter. This would make the system more powerful than the Famicom. The Sega Mark III came with a greatly changed controller. Both the SG-1000 and SG-1002 came with a controller primarily centered around a joystick. Inspired by the success of the Famicom, the Mark III had a controller primarily centered around a D-pad and two buttons on the top. The system would come with a joystick attachment that could be screwed onto the controller if the player desired. Sega released the Sega Mark III in Japan on October 20th, 1985. It originally sold for 15,000 yen, over $125 in 2023. When it was released, though, it was not popular. The reasons for the lack of popularity of the Sega Mark III are a bit complex, mainly because the series of SG-1000 consoles are a bit complex. One of the main reasons, though, was due to the games released for the console. Although the Mark III was backwards compatible with the SG-1000, able to play SG-1000 games, there were just not a lot of games for the SG-1000. The SG-1000 only had between 32 and 40 cartridges released for it, at least by Sega. Some of the highlights would be versions of Galaga, Lode Runner, Zaxxon, Hypersports, and Space Invaders. But none of these games would be popular enough to sell the original console. The SG-1000 system could also play video games that came on cards, known as Sega My Cards. These games had more popular titles, including ports of Choplifter, Elevator Action, Hero, and a version of Hang-On known as Hang-On 2. The original SG-1000 system would need an accessory to play these cards, known as a card catcher. The SG-1002 and the Mark III would come with the card catcher built into the system itself, but these games would also struggle to be popular. The cards themselves would hold sometimes less than a quarter of the space as the cartridges, so larger games would need to be on cartridges. For the Sega Mark III, though, there were only two games designed for the console when it was launched. Those were a version of Hang-On and a game named Teddy Boy Blues Yoko Ishino. Hang-On, of course, was originally created by Sega that year, so a home version of the successful arcade game could have also been quite successful. Teddy Boy Blues is a port of a 1985 Sega arcade game by the same name. In the game, the player plays as a young boy with a gun. The player must shrink and collect enemies that spawn from dice. The game plays an instrumental version of a Japanese pop song named Teddy Boy Blues by Yoko Ishino, which is how the game gets its name. The lack of iconic games in comparison to what was on the Famicom is often cited as a main reason the Sega Mark III did not do well in the market when it was released. One reason that may have caused this was Nintendo's third-party licensing agreements at the time. In order for a company to get a third-party licensing agreement with Nintendo, the company would need to agree that games released for the Famicom would not be published on any other console. This left Sega in a position to develop and port the majority, if not all, the games for the Mark III by themselves. This led to a lack of games. By the end of 1985, only 3 more games were released for the console, bringing the total number of games to 5. None of these would be particularly successful. This fell far short of the 70 games, including several original titles, that the Famicom would have when the Mark III was released. Sega struggled to gain a foothold in the home console market with any of the SG-1000 consoles, including the Sega Mark III. However, Sega would continue to pursue their place in the market. Sega was all in on the Mark III though, having discontinued the original SG-1000 in 1984 and the SG-1002 the same month as the Mark III's release. Not only will we hear from Sega again as we continue, we will be hearing about the Sega Mark III again in the future as well. That will do it for the story of the Sega Mark III for now. My name is Baller Scuba. This has been Video Games Over Time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in our next video when we go on the run.